It's 8:37 on WMAL. Time to check in with Jake Tapper of CNN. Of course, you know, Jake is the anchor of the lead on CNN, a well-known cat lover, therefore the music. Jake, how are you this morning?
I'm good. You know, we lost our cat last week.
Oh, well, now hold it.
Well, let's cut the music.
Now we
then.
feel
Now
bad. I'm
that's
so
terrible.
sorry.
No, it's okay. She's had a good 18 years, but we're now 100% a dog family now.
Well done, sir.
Well, you know, I am sorry because I would not have made light of the situation.
No. Honestly, she had a better life than most people. It's fine.
And hence our problem with most cats.
That's
but let's
right.
move on.
That's right. Okay, so look, we want to talk about the VA situation because I know this is a story that you've been following and that you care deeply about the men and women who have served this country. So Secretary Shinseki says that, well, he's upset about this. In fact, he's mad.
Any allegation, any adverse incident like this makes me mad as hell.
And then we heard over the weekend that the White House Chief of Staff says the president, well, he's madder than hell.
The president is madder than hell. And I've got the scars to prove it, given the briefings that I've given the president, the conversations that he and Rick and I have had on these matters. But at the same time that we're looking at accountability, we want to continue to perform to provide our veterans the services that they have earned.
All right. And yet, though, we hear that the Justice Department, at least initially, is not going to take any action against these people who allowed 40 veterans to die in Phoenix. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think we had McDonough on our show on Thursday before. I think you were just playing his interview with Major Garrett of CBS. And he said similar things to me on Thursday. Look, I think that there are serious structural and systemic problems at the VA. First of all, let me just say, and my mom used to work for the VA. It is, generally speaking, a lot of medical providers and people who care deeply about veterans working for not a lot of money, in very bad hours. So it's not a question of of the 300,000 or so employees of the VA system, are they bad people? They're not. But there are systematic problems. There are questions about accountability. There are questions of, the reason that this waiting list thing happened is because the VA, trying to help veterans, instituted a new policy saying people seeking primary care physicians for the first time need to have an appointment within the first 14 days of calling. And that's when this fake list was created because the VA could not, at least in Phoenix and other places, could not meet that requirement. So I think this is a bigger deal than just, saying you're mad as hell or madder than hell. This is a question of structural problems at the VA, ones that aren't as interesting to talk about necessarily, but incredibly important. And then, the accountability issue is a big one. An example that critics of the VA cite is there was an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease at the Pittsburgh VA a few years ago. 5 or 6 veterans died as a result of that outbreak. And the person in charge of the hospital, she was given a glowing recommendation, glowing job evaluation that didn't even mention the outbreak, and the person in charge of her was given a bonus. This is after an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease that cost 5 or 6 veterans their lives. So, I mean, there's example after example like that of accountability issues at the VA, and I think there are questions, and I'm not calling for Rick Shinseki to step down, but I think there are questions as to whether or not, after 6 years of his leadership, if he is able to make the changes that need to be made, even though he has done a number of other great things for veterans.
Yeah, and Jake Tepper, you bring up the issue of the Legionnaire's disease, and of course the issue in Phoenix, as so many people know about this. This really is about it seems on the surface when you look at the reports that these are some hospital administrators who are, as you said, completely unaccountable and still getting bonuses. One of the things about this scandal in Phoenix is they were wiping the records clean and keeping 2 sets of books so the hospital administrators could still get performance bonuses for keeping those wait times down. I think what makes people angry is this is just the sort of thing that the Obama administration would point to as reasons for health care reform. If these were in the private sector, these hospital administrators, they'd be demonized. And yet people look at the VA and they think, oh my gosh, this is government-run health care for our vets, the people who deserve it most. What does this mean to my health care as the government gets more involved?
Well, I don't want to get into the Obamacare facet of this because that's obviously a political point that people are making, and they can be free to make it. But just in terms of what's going on with veterans, I mean, I think the bottom line is that we as a nation made a promise to these men and women. You join the service, you risk your life. You're not going to get a lot of money. You're not going to get a lot of recognition necessarily, but we will take care of you in these ways, and one of those ways is the VA. And in too many instances, although it's not as though nobody has a good experience at the VA, but in too many instances, we are failing to meet the promise that we made to them.
Yeah.
That's one. Two, I do question whether or not the changes that need to be made can be made under the system that exists right now. Obviously, when you have a fake list, you are not being willing to say to your bosses, we cannot make this requirement. We cannot meet this. Now, since 2006, the VA has hired about 100,000 new employees to meet the demand of all the 2.5, 2.6 million veterans we have of the post 9/11 wars, Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. And I don't know enough about it, but of those 100,000, how many of them are medical personnel? How many of them are clerks? How many of them are directly improving the lives of veterans, and how many of them are not? Because it's not necessarily a question of needing to hire new employees. It's a question of which employees are being hired.
Real quick question on Benghazi. We got about 30, 40 seconds left here. Look, Dianne Feinstein says, look, this is a lynch mob. This select committee on Capitol Hill is going to ask questions. I notice, Chuck Todd, I won't hold you responsible for the sins of Chuck Todd, but he says, look, we have all the answers. Do you agree? Are there answers still to be gotten here?
I still don't know. And, as you know, I was covering Benghazi from that night on. And you can look at the transcripts of September 14th, 2012, and I was asking Carney about this at the briefing.
Yeah.
I still don't know why the security requests made by people on the ground in Libya, diplomatic and security personnel, why they weren't being met. I still don't know. Now, I know that there were some people in Libya who were saying, I don't need extra security, but I haven't heard a full accounting as to that. And then, of course, there's the whole question of the clandestine nature of what was going on in Benghazi. Most of the people there were CIA, so there's still a lot we don't know about what exactly they were doing there. So, no, I don't have all the answers to all my questions now.
All right. Jake Tapper, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Have a good
Jake.
day.